And I'll begin my presentation after I advance through a couple more slides here. Just to acknowledge our founding partners and supporters of this conference. So hello, my name is Michaela Bettez. I am the Senior Associate Open Educational Resources Librarian at California State University, Fullerton. Thank you for taking your time during this afternoon to hear my presentation about this. So during this talk, I'll be sharing my experience participating in a year-long faculty learning community and the librarian-focused LibGuide that I created as my primary deliverable for that project. So I'll get more into the details of how I arrived at creating the guide as we progress, but to get you started, I'll give you some background on the CSUF campus community. So Cal State Fullerton is located in Orange County in Southern California. We're the largest of the 23 California State University campuses. As of this particular academic year, our full-time enrollment was over 34,000 students. The majority of those students are identifying as Hispanic or Latinx, so we're designated as a Hispanic serving institution. We have over 2,200 faculty, and more than half of those are tenure and tenure track. As far as AI on our campus goes, our Faculty Development Center has been offering AI-related training and professional development opportunities for the last couple of years. Those are well attended and popular. Our campus IT department rolled out our own campus version of a large language model called Titan GPT, named after our campus mascot, and it's focused on CSUF policy and procedure. So that had a soft launch last fall and into the winter, and that went live fully to the full community spring 2025. So I'm interested to see how our faculty and students are responding to it, but no data yet. We currently have no official university-wide policy on AI, and that's actually intentional. As far as I know, there are no plans to implement one, but we realized that there needed to be something in place for faculty and students to refer to. So in the fall of 2023, our Academic Senate IT committee put together a campus-wide task force to come up with some general guidelines to give to our community. I was part of this committee, and we researched really what other institutions who were kind of our size and our general makeup were doing. So we were looking at a lot of other CSU universities in our area. And what we came up with were more of a set of guiding principles that we shared with our community in the spring of 2024. So these guiding principles are pretty vague. They're just sort of a set of expectations for how faculty and students will use AI on our campus, but it largely leaves policy to be dictated by the faculty themselves. So nothing about what you can see on the screen here is particularly prescriptive or prohibitive. It's not giving any particular guidance in how things should be done, other than some basic warnings about privacy and security. So with the lack of official policy, there was an expectation that faculty and students were going to want a little bit more concrete information. And as anybody who works in a library knows, whether or not something is rolled out through the library, questions often come to us and people seek guidance. So we knew we had a role to play in this changing dynamic. We just weren't really sure what helping our community was going to look like. And this felt like a murkier issue than some of the other past technical advances that we've had. In discussions in our library amongst our librarian faculty, there were concerns raised about if we should be promoting the use of AI and what our role would be. So some folks expressed concern that if they were helping a student with AI and they didn't know what the faculty policy was, they may inadvertently be helping the student cheat. Other folks thought it would be best until we kind of let the dust settle a bit and get a sense of our campus culture around AI before we really work to do any promotion or discouragement of AI kind of depending on the case. So it was a little bit of a fraught time where we weren't 100% sure what we were going to be doing. And it was at the same moment our Writing Across the Curriculum department launched their call for the first AI faculty learning community that was going to be offered on our campus. And this to me seemed like a really good opportunity to learn more, not just about the way that AI works and its applications in education, but to have engaged conversations with faculty and get an idea of what their questions and concerns were so that I could take that back to the library and start meeting some of those particular needs. So Writing Across the Curriculum is a partnership between our campus Faculty Development Center and the Writing Center. It focuses on supporting faculty throughout the university in their efforts to teach with writing in any discipline. So these are not just for people doing comp and history, it's also for computer science, engineering, any discipline where they're interested in adding a writing component. WAC is there to support them through that. And the library's had an existing relationship with WAC for years. A really good example is every year, the Writing Across the Curriculum team would offer a writing retreat for graduate students and undergraduate students doing honors projects for an intensive period of time where they could get writing done. And librarians were always embedded in these retreats to serve as partners in helping with researching citations and things like that. So we've had a good relationship with them. And they actually reached out directly to the library and asked if anybody would be interested in joining the faculty learning community. And that was really the push I kind of needed to apply. It can be really intimidating for librarians to go into what's primarily a teaching faculty space. Sometimes the work that we do is different enough that it's can feel like maybe they're not going to understand where we're coming from, or they're not going to appreciate our perspective on teaching and how that will look different. So hearing from the people at WAC saying, we want the library involved, we want your perspective and feedback in this discussion was really, really helpful. So the learning community was made up of 12 faculty that represented 7 of our 8 colleges. The only one that was missing was from our College of the Arts, which arts has kind of a different relationship to AI. So they didn't come into the first round of this cohort group, which perhaps they might have in the later ones. And we met once a month for 90 minutes on Zoom. And the learning community was set as sort of a flipped model. So we were doing all of our learning and processing of information before going into the meeting. So we were responsible for watching videos and reading articles and completing the work. And then once we got into the meeting space, that's when we would have these conversations, raise our concerns with each other, and talk through the information that we'd been discussing. The overall goal of the faculty learning community was to create a collaborative space to practice, discuss, and share work with AI. And since we were all coming from different disciplines and departments, flexibility was built into what all of these things could look like. So it was really a learner-driven type of curriculum where we had general things that we knew we were going to talk about. But what these discussions looked like and the expectations for the deliverables we were going to have to provide, they had a lot of flexibility. So over the months, we discussed general topics of AI, such as like how a large language model works, and generative AI result evaluation, and also creating effective prompts. But we also try to discuss more subjective aspects, like what would critical AI literacy look like on our campus? What would we want students to know? If we were going to come up with a framework for our community, how would we structure those components? And then, of course, we had lots of discussions about the ethics of using, promoting, or in some cases, the ethics of rejecting AI. So it was really good, interesting conversations that we're having. And as the learning community progressed, we turned more toward its use in specific education contexts. So we were experimenting with using AI for pedagogical purposes like lesson planning, assignment creation, and the development of student learning outcomes. But we were also considered how and where AI could be used throughout the class, um, and the importance of creating policy that made that as explicit as possible. Nobody wanted to set the students up to fail. So it was really important that we worked together to come up with situations where everybody could understand their different tolerances for where AI could exist in their class structure and in the work that students would be doing. So we spent a fair amount of time talking about academic integrity and the kind of tricky subject of citing or attributing AI. And really, the goal was not necessarily to promote the use of AI. The outcome was much more about making a good faith attempt to see how AI worked for educational purposes and then sharing what we learned together with our own departments and colleges. So there was no expectation that everybody was going to come out of it thinking that AI was this perfect tool for them and that it would solve all of their problems. It was much more like, give it a try, reflect on it, and, is it the boogeyman you thought it was, or is it really going to save you a lot of effort? So our progress and success in the learning community was measured by the deliverables we turned in over the course of the year. This included small things like taking an existing assignment that we had and adding an AI component to it. And it went all the way up to drafting a fully inclusive, what we called an AI ready syllabus. The smaller changes were easy for me to do because I teach information literacy instruction sessions like most librarians do. But as it got toward the bigger, like scaffolded assignments, and in particular creating the syllabus, this is where I started to have some issues with the fact that I'm not a teaching faculty member. So it didn't seem like a good use of my time or of the people in the learning community's time, since they were going to be the ones to review it, for me to come up with like a fake syllabus for a class that I don't teach. So I met with the group and we talked about what is something that I could do instead. And in that conversation, we talked about like what the purpose of a syllabus is. Obviously, it's meant to give students information and a roadmap of learning, but it also has a faculty purpose where it can serve as a guideline for colleagues who may be teaching similar content or even in some cases the same class, just in different sections. So they really pushed me to come up with something that would best serve other librarians and make something really useful out of it. And our library, like most, subscribes to SpringShare, so I decided to create a LibGuide where I could share all of this information that I was learning and the discussions that I was taking part in. So I'm going to switch over to the live site. And the resulting guide that you're seeing here, I'll put the slide back up for the QR code in a moment if anybody wants to scan that. It's a culmination of the work that I was doing on this faculty learning community. So I had to spend a decent amount of time readjusting the language so that it made more sense for a librarian audience. And the main reason I wanted to target my colleagues for this resource is because there's so many of us who serve in a liaison capacity to all of our departments and our colleges. And I wanted them to feel prepared to have these conversations and to overcome some of that intimidation and the fact that because AI was so new and is still continually changing, it's hard to ever really feel like you're an expert in something. And liaisons are supposed to be kind of the area experts for their faculty, for their library components. So this guide was meant to give them different facets of their job that they could talk about. And I didn't want to create a guide that ended up being a really long list of resources. There are so many librarians in the US and throughout the world even who've created just fantastic AI for education guides. Some of them have such extensive lists of material that like they're really just exceptional. And I didn't want to recreate that because my colleagues, like most library colleagues, are information professionals. It's their job to find things. So if they wanted to get that, I figured that was something that they would certainly be able to do on their own. So I wanted to create something that was a little bit more curated to make it an easier process for them to find this information. And outside of resources, I really wanted to introduce ideas and some components that we talked about a lot in the faculty learning community that they would not have been privy to if they were just doing research on AI. And one of the things that we came up with in our discussions amongst ourselves about creating AI assignments was this question of consent. If students can only use AI to complete an assignment, are they actually consenting to use it? That was a very thorny question that we went around and around on. And what we kind of all agreed is that, like, if students don't want to use AI because of the ethical implications, the privacy concerns, or any other reason, they have to have the ability to opt out. Because if you can't choose something else, if you're going to miss a grade, then you're not actually consenting. And that's what I wanted to really emphasize with my colleagues. And it's the same thing with making sure that they understood the privacy and security concerns that were coming up. This is something that faculty in their conversations with their colleagues that they brought back to the learning community were saying everybody had a concern to some degree or another about privacy. And that was something that I thought made a lot of sense for us to really make sure that I was driving home to my colleagues as well. And the last point that I really wanted to make sure that they had access to was um, figuring out some talking points. So it's very intimidating to try to start a conversation about AI when it's a pretty divisive topic for some people. And that's totally just subjective to my own experience, where like a casual comment about AI to one person is like a nice little conversation, and a casual comment to somebody else turns into a very angry debate back and forth. So I wanted to give them even just some talking points that were beyond the question of, do you want me to talk about AI and information literacy? I wanted to drill down to more of the specific things that I was seeing in the faculty learning community and trying to instill some best practices. So really enforcing the idea that since our campus has no AI policy, then it's up to faculty. So if our faculty that we're liaising to have not been proactive about creating a policy, us asking them, hey, what's your AI policy? Where is it acceptable for students to use it? Where is it prohibited? That might be the nudge they need to include it, or it's at least an acknowledgement that we understand that this is our new reality and we have to work within it. So the guide is also, this was kind of like a nice little workaround for some of the issues that our faculty were experiencing about whether or not we were promoting AI. Since this is a librarian focus, I could set this as a private resource because it's meant to be sort of like an internal practice thing. Obviously, anybody who has the link can get there. It's just not on our public-facing page of guide lists. So it makes it that we can come here, anybody in the library can contribute to it and access it, but it's not on the front page. And we're still sort of mulling over the right way to go about it. But like so many things, the information just changes so rapidly that everybody's sort of concerned about the time that's going to be spent working on an AI guide and the new resources that come out, often because they have the benefit of a little bit more time and finesse, are just getting better and better. So it's something that I definitely see this guide continuing to be a living document. And I'll go back just in case anybody wants to scan the QR code and take a look for themselves. I'm, as I mentioned, the open education librarian, so I practice what I preach. The guide is available to be copied, and anything that you need from it under a Creative Commons attribution and share alike. So if you like any of this information and you want to use it, I just ask that you please license it in a similar way so that other people can use your great work too. And I really think that this was just such a unique opportunity to sort of be a fly on the wall of faculty conversation, because even though we have in some cases really good, really strong relationships with our faculty as liaisons, that doesn't always mean that they're going to talk to us like they talk to other people who are teaching in their department or who are teaching a similar type of class. So getting to be in the room uh, on their conversations and listen to the concerns and the questions and the ideation that people had about AI really made making this guide a valuable instrument so that we could have a little bit of that inside track without having to, continually pester faculty with questions. So I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have right now. Otherwise, if you would like to send me an email, please feel free to do so. I'm always happy to talk about this. And if you want, I can try to drop the link to the guide in the chat as well. So let me just stop sharing. Oh, I'm glad somebody likes my poster. I do see your question here, Michael. Do you think you would see your guide as a directional site to point to available conversations and meetings about AI on campus? Yeah, I think that's something that it definitely could serve that purpose. Um, for now, it's just because it's meant to be sort of an informational thing for folks. I don't have a ton of time to update it as regularly as I would like to, which I think is true of everybody who has to do any LibGuides work. But I would love it if there was a way for us to set up something that was a little more automated so that we could tune into these conversations when they're happening live. And CSUF is such a big campus too that we don't we don't have a lot of things, but we also just don't have a unified calendar. So it's really hard to know when things are going on. So we'll kind of find out day of or after the fact that like our School of Business had an AI panel or our IT department was offering something. So it's hard to kind of corral everything that goes on at a big institution. Yeah, the update really is a big lift, and it's something that, I often struggle in justifying the use of AI for a lot of things. I have serious ethical concerns that I know a lot of people have raised in these sessions. So finding the right time and the right way to use them that feels appropriate is also really hard too. And knowing what to promote also takes some decent vetting, as I don't want to refer faculty either in my department or other ones to somewhere where they might not be getting an ethical AI experience. Oh, and Kimberly, I just saw your question now. Our university does pay for Chat GPT, but I actually don't use that one because I sort of just like I feel like a grandma when I say this, but like I started with Google Gemini and I haven't left it. So it's been hard to try different things. But yeah, like it's definitely going to change the way the campus interacts with it. And the little bit that I've heard from students so far about our campus Chat GPT, um, They kind of thought it was a trick. They thought maybe they were like it was like a honeypot and like if they used it they were going to actually get into trouble. So I'm very interested in exploring this, conversation on campus further once we get a little bit more feedback from students and faculty about using our campus specific ChatGPT function. Oh, I see another question. Sorry, I'm trying to read through questions at the same time. As a public library children's employee, how do I best start conversations with educators in my community about AI in their classrooms? That's a great question, and it's a tough one because it really does have to be based on relationships. And I think kind of a nice neutral starting point could be just, one of the things that I recommended to my faculty is just like, how do you see it impacting your work? And maybe they'll say like, well, there's good applications that I could use it for or not, but just sort of giving people the opportunity to talk about concerns or things that they're excited about. Um, that might be enough to just kind of let them know that you're available and approachable to talk about it. And I'm always very upfront that, like everybody, like I'm learning at the same time they are. And, so the more questions they ask me, the more I get to learn and then share with them. And that's always kind of come across as um, a good faith kind of thing, is that like I'm not pretending to be an expert on something that I'm not. Yes, Chris, that the debate about should we teach about tools that are not officially sanctioned is absolutely the concern that so many of my colleagues were talking about. And that's sort of what kind of scared them away from creating a public facing guide at this point, because relationships with faculty in teaching departments, they're precious and they're so important to maintain. And that was what we were concerned, is we didn't want to damage those relationships. And we didn't want to damage on our campus, our very strong reputation that we have for being people who are respected and we're known for being good sources of information. And it's still kind of a fraught thing that we haven't really come to a conclusion on. And it's, there's questions that are still out there about like, is this something that we should be doing? Are we sort of letting our students down by trying to protect our relationship with faculty? Like it's still such a murky thing that I think we'll only be able to hopefully figure out by having more conversations and getting to the heart of what people are worried about. Because I obviously we know academic integrity is a big thing, but that's not everything. That's not the only concern that I'm hearing from faculty and students. The ecological impact is a very serious concern that continues to be raised on our campus by our students and our faculty. And thank you so much again, everybody, for attending. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know the next session starts very soon, so please feel free to get in a break.